All right, can I get a big round of applause for everybody, please? I want to thank everybody sincerely for attending today. Together we make Tulsa a stronger market. I want to briefly share how this luncheon came about. As you are aware, the hotel supply growth in Tulsa is rapidly growing, even at a faster pace than the national trend. Yet Tulsa's ADR has remained relatively stagnant and significantly below competitive markets, which basically means we are leaving money on the table. Recognizing this, we decided to bring in the experts to share where we are now, where we are expected to be, and more opportunities for revenue growth. Throughout this luncheon, we encourage you to ask questions. We'll have a wireless microphone traveling around the room, so please raise your hand and ask questions as the presentation unfolds. And I believe, Brittany, you're going to take the microphone around. So just look for the lady in red, and she will give you the microphone. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce our guest speaker, Lauren Faulkner with Smith Travel Research. Lauren began her career in the lodging industry after earning her bachelor's degree from Western Kentucky University. Lauren is the business development executive for STR. In this role, she is responsible for the growth of STR's hotel participant programs across the central and southeastern United States. Because of her expertise, she is often featured as a guest speaker for industry overviews. In addition, Faulkner serves as an ambassador for the American Hotel and Lodging Association's Under 30 Gateway program. On the board of directors for the Greater Nashville Hospitality Association and is a member of the Tennessee Women in Lodging chapter. Please welcome Lauren Faulkner.
Let's see. Yes. Can everyone hear me okay? Okay. Well, good afternoon, everyone. It's great to be back in the state of Oklahoma. I just want to begin by saying Happy Veterans Day to all of you veterans, and thank you for your service. For those of you who are in the room. Before I get started, just want to kind of give you an overview of how this is going to play out today for the next hour or so. I am going to start with kind of a top-down overview, beginning with what we're seeing going on in the total U.S., and then we'll talk about the top 25 U.S. markets so that you have that comparison for Tulsa and for other Oklahoma surrounding areas as well. And then we'll also jump into what we're seeing in the pipeline and for the remainder of 2014 and 2015 projections. Also, I do want to let you know that these slides will be available for you to review, so don't feel like you need to take down a whole lot of notes. It will be posted on www.hotelnewsnow.com. And this is actually our digital news site. How many of you are familiar with hotelnewsnow.com? Not as many as I thought, so go ahead and sign up. You can sign up for free daily newsletters on this site, and it just keeps you in the know of everything that's going on in the industry. In addition to that, you'll have access to all of our industry presentations. Those are there for you for free, and they're posted there for 45 days. So this is my spoiler alert, your 5 things to know. So you can take this back to your bosses at the end of the day and sound smart, and then after this 5 things to know slide, you can just sit back and relax and take a nap, I guess. So STR's forecast for the U.S. and for Tulsa is positive. We're expecting to see robust growth moving forward as far as RevPAR growth is concerned, and supply growth is also beginning to uptick as well. We have seen the highest RevPAR growth ever in the history of STR collecting data. This was the highest reported third quarter ever. We saw RevPAR growth of 9.2%. Ebola does continue to be a travel scare, but it really hasn't impacted any performance on the hotel industry whatsoever here in the U.S. And I believe I heard on the news this morning that there are now 0 cases of Ebola here in the U.S., so that is great news. And then also we're beginning to see group demand slowly return, which is always a great thing to see. We saw that decline a few years ago, and now we're finally beginning to see the return of groups. And then, as I mentioned earlier, supply growth is beginning to accelerate, especially here in Tulsa, which we'll get into here shortly. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and start with a total U.S. review. And I want to ask you, those of you who are in the room, how many of you actually read the STAR reports and are the ones that are utilizing the reports? Okay, so a good percentage of you. For those of you who are in the room and do not look at the STAR reports, I just want to kind of give you an overview of how we collect this data. On a monthly and on a weekly and daily basis, actually, hoteliers are providing us with 3 pieces of information, what we call supply, demand, and revenue. So supply is going to be the total rooms available. Sorry about that. Demand is going to be the total rooms sold, and then revenue is going to be the total room revenue. And so we use those figures to then calculate occupancy, average daily rate, which we'll be referring to as ADR, and then revenue per available room. So how we get occupancy, we take the total rooms that were sold and we divide that by rooms available. So rooms sold divided by rooms available is going to be the occupancy numbers that I'm referring to moving shortly. ADR, that is going to be calculated by total room revenue divided by rooms sold. And then revenue per available room, we just simply multiply occupancy times ADR. So hopefully that will shed some light on these numbers as I move forward today. So like I said, we're going to start with the total US. So this is going to be September 2014 year-to-date numbers. So what we're seeing all the way from January to September 2014 so far this year, we're seeing very strong demand growth. If you look, demand is up 4.3% year-to-date. Total occupancy or average occupancy for the US right now is averaging around 66%. That's up 3.5% from this time last year. ADR for the US right now is at $115, and that is up 4.5% year over year. So we're really seeing occupancy and ADR driving RevPAR growth for the US. So we're seeing strong RevPAR growth of 8.2%. Revenue per available room is around $76 right now, and total room revenue for the US is up a little over 9% year over year. So if we zoom out and look at supply and demand on an annualized basis, we are seeing really the best fundamentals ever in our lifetime. We're seeing muted supply growth. There's not a whole lot of new supply growth coming into the US on average right now, but we're seeing strong demand percent changes. If you look back in late 2009, early 2010, we saw the deepest demand decline we'd ever seen, but we also saw the strongest rebound, stronger than anybody ever really expected where demand is concerned. Demand came back 8%, and you can see that downward trajectory where the blue line is. A lot of people thought that that line was going to continue to decrease, but we've seen a surprise and demand is actually on an uptick again. Demand is growing 3.9% year over year. So great fundamentals where supply and demand are concerned. Also, if we look at the same time period and look at demand and average daily rate percent changes, we're finally creating some real pricing power. Because demand is soaring, hoteliers are finally able to raise their rates a little bit. And so we're seeing ADR percent changes of 4.3% year over year. So the question everybody is asking is, how long is this positive period of RevPAR growth going to continue? Well, you can look at the last 2 cycles. So 2 cycles ago, the positive period of RevPAR growth lasted for about 112 months. This last time it lasted for 65 months. And so far, life has been good for about 48 months. And we expect to see that trend continue for the next 2 years or so. So for the next 18 to 24 months, life should be great as a hotelier. So if we look now at the different chain scales, here I have the luxury, upper upscale hotels, upper mid-scale, and then economy is going to be on the right. So you see that we're really seeing supply growth in that upper tier segment. In the upscale segment, we're seeing supply growth by about 3.5%. We're seeing strong demand growth in that upscale category of almost 7%. Looking to the left, if you look at upper upscale, we're seeing demand growth of almost 4%. And then in the luxury category, we're seeing demand growth of about 2%. The economy chain scale segment is also seeing strong demand growth by about 4% year to date. And so now looking at these same change scales, I have occupancy and average daily rate percent change. You can see that pricing power and profit growth. Pricing power is going to lead to profit growth. That's our hopes, at least. So for the luxury scale, they're really driving rate growth on that upper end right now. The luxury segment rates are up 5.5%, followed by the upper upscale segment rates are up 5% year over year. And also, surprisingly, the economy segment is also driving their rates right now as well. Rates in the economy side are up 4.5% year over year. And it's also great, if you look at these occupancy figures across the board, we're seeing occupancy growth among all of the chain scales as well. And then I forgot to mention in the beginning, if you all have any questions while we're going through any of these slides, please be sure to speak up. We don't have to save questions till the very end. So if you have a thought or a comment, feel free to interrupt.
I just have a quick one while you're going through this and we're seeing all these different segments. Could you give us a couple examples of brands that fit into each one?
Yeah, well, of course, your Ritz-Carlton is going to be on the luxury side of things. Yes, the question was to name some of the properties that are going to fall into each of these chain scales. And so I actually have a PDF that I can email out and send to Brittany that will list all of them. But just to give you an idea, the luxury is going to be, of course, your Ritz-Carlton. Upper upscale, that's going to be your Marriott's, your Hiltons, I believe, fall into those categories as well. Upscale, that is going to be Hilton Garden Inn. I believe that they fall into the upscale category. Upper mid-scale, that's actually now going to include the Best Western Plus properties that are now, they moved from mid-scale to upper mid-scale at the beginning of this year. Mid-scale, that is going to include, let's see, off the top of my head, I would say, I don't know, I don't want to misspeak, so I'll send you the list of the properties, and then of course your Super 8s are going to fall into the economy chain scales as well. All right, so moving forward, absolute occupancy, if you look among all of the chain scales, this is going to be 2014 numbers compared to this time last year. So if you look at the darker blue, that's 2014. Occupancy right now in that upper segment for luxury is going to be 76% compared to last year, where occupancy in the luxury end was 75%. We've seen about 2% growth in occupancy on the upper upscale chain scale. Upscale right now, occupancy is around 75%. Upper mid-scale, we're going to see occupancy averaging around 68%. And then the mid-scale, a little bit lower occupancy of 59.8%. And then economy really is not too far behind the mid-scale segment where occupancy is concerned. Their average occupancy is 58% compared to 56% occupancy for the economy segment last year. So very high occupancies on the upper ends when you look at those. So we looked at occupancy. Let's now shift gears a little bit and looking at these same chain scales, let's consider rates. So the luxury end is really driving rates right now. If you're staying at the Ritz-Carlton right now, you're going to be paying around 302 nights on average in that luxury segment right now, compared to $286 per night last year. Upper upscale, their average daily rates right now are around $168. That's up $8 from this time last year. Upscale, average daily rates are $128. The upper mid-scale category, around $105 per night. And then the mid-scale rates are $80. And then if you look at economy, their average daily rates are only $57 right now. So now let's shift gears a little bit and talk about segmentation. STR breaks down the type of traveler by 3 different categories. So group being any group of 10 or more, transient being your typical overnight guests, and then contract. That is going to be groups that they're staying in properties at rates contracted out in advance. So for example, the airline crews. So right now I'm just going to be focusing on transient and group. So here I like to show this chart because it really illustrates the shift in the type of traveler between group and transient. So if you look at 2005, the transient traveler accounted for about 57% of the market share, and in group was only 43%. Well, in 2013, when we looked at that number, you can see that there was really a shift. The transient traveler then began to account for 64% of the share, and we saw the decrease in the groups. So groups were only accounting for 36% compared to in 2005, where the groups were accounting for 43% of the market share. So we really saw the transient uptick in demand and the loss of groups. However, moving forward, you can see that groups are finally beginning to return. If we look at the luxury and the upper upscale segments, you can see that group demand is up 3.3%, or group occupancy, I should say. And in the upper upscale category, group occupancy is at 4.1%. So it's great to finally begin to see the return of the groups. If we look at average daily rates, you can see that there's strong transient room rate growth. In the luxury segment, rates are up 6% for the transient side. And then on the group side, rates are up 3.6% in that luxury category. And then group rates are up 2.6% in the upper upscale category. So transient ADR growth has really been helped by the lack of room availability. We're really seeing healthy demand and rate numbers for the transient side. You can see that if you look at ADR percent changes, ADR growth is about 5.5% on the transient side. And then if we look at group demand, you can really see, as I mentioned earlier, that group demand is finally beginning to roar back. At the beginning of the year, when we were looking at that downward trajectory, we weren't sure how strong that rebound of that blue line was really going to be. So now, to be standing here looking at September 2014 data, we're very pleased to see that return of the group traveler. Question?
In the group travel, we seem to be seeing a shorter window, a booking window than we used to historically.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be in 2 years and 3 years. It's 12 months, 18 months. They're really closing. The groups seem to be booking in a shorter time frame instead of 2 and 3 years out. Is that what you guys are seeing as well?
We are seeing that. And then another thing that we're seeing where groups is concerned is that the group really isn't being reported the same way that it used to be. And so people simply aren't booking with the group rate, or they're sometimes booking at the group rate and then they find that they can get a cheaper rate booking as a transient traveler. So it's what we call a rebooking phenomenon, where they will cancel with their group rate and then rebook as a transient traveler. So that's something else that we're running into where a group is concerned. But great question. Anything else on that right now? No? Okay. So now I'm going to talk about some of the top 25 U.S. markets, or actually this is not going to be the top 25. This is what we're seeing, the best and the worst performing markets in the U.S. And this is RevPAR percent change. So these markets on the left are performing the best, seeing the strongest RevPAR growth, and then those on the right not doing as well as we'd like to see them doing. So the hot markets right now is going to be Nashville, Augusta, Georgia, Denver, Colorado, Fort Myers, Sarasota, Memphis, Atlanta, Seattle. And then those markets that are not doing so well, Oklahoma City is on that list. Moderate RevPAR growth of 1.6%. We'll talk about that here shortly. And some of the other markets right now, North Dakota, they're not doing very well right now. That's because of oversupply. They built so many hotels over there, and a lot of apartments went up over there as well, so they just really can't support the new growth right now. Tucson, Arizona, and Rochester, New York are also on this list as well. If you look at those markets that are performing the best where ADR is concerned, you see that there are 4 markets that are really driving rate growth right now. They have all sorts of pricing power. Right now in Nashville, Tennessee, rates are up 13%. San Jose, rates are up 12.8%. San Fran, 11%. And then Oakland, California, driving rates by about 10% right now.
Lauren,
Yes.
you're from Nashville. What's different in Nashville than, say, Memphis or some of the other cities that it competes with?
Yeah, Nashville has a brand new convention center right now, and so we're getting a lot of groups that we used to not have coming into the market. And then in addition to that, we have the greatest free publicity that a city could ask for with the new ABC show, Nashville. I don't know if any of you in the room watch it, but we are seeing a lot of people coming into the city just because of the show. And then we just don't have a lot of hotels available right now. We had a new 800-room Omni that just opened up over there, but there's a lot of new supply growth coming into Nashville as well. So they're able to drive those rates. Okay, so if we look at the best and worst performing markets as far as ADR percent change goes, you see that Nashville, San Fran, Seattle, Denver, and Boston are all experiencing strong rate growth. Those markets that are not experiencing as significant of rate growth are going to be New York, New Orleans, Norfolk, Washington, D.C. In D.C. right now, average occupancy is about 70%, but they're really not seeing any rate growth at all over there. Yes?
I'm missing Vegas and Orlando.
We actually, STR does not consider Las Vegas to be one of the top markets. That is because we just don't have a significant sample over there. A lot of the casino hotels are not reporting data to us. Orlando, they are included in our top 25 US markets, but this was just the best and the worst performing markets. And I think I actually said top 25, but that wasn't the actual top 25 list, so I misspoke on that part. But yeah.
Question.
Yes.
Nashville last year, wasn't there like a flood and then didn't Gaylord change to a Marriott? And
That was about 3 or 4 years ago. Yeah, it was in 2009 or 2010, I believe. But yeah, all of those properties are open and operating and have been through renovations over there as well. Yes, good question. So now if we get closer to home and talk about what we're seeing in the state of Oklahoma, this is for the state of Oklahoma as a whole, September year-to-date figures. There are currently 838 hotels within the state. That is going to equal about 64,000 rooms, a little over 64,000. STR is currently collecting data from about 70% of those properties. So we have a pretty strong sample within the state, but if you are a hotelier in the room that's not reporting data, I encourage you to do so, so that these numbers can be more accurate. But occupancy for Oklahoma right now is 61.5%. That is down a little bit over last year, down by about 1.8%. Average daily rate for the state is around $79. That's up almost 5%. So it's great to see rate growth finally beginning to contribute to RevPAR growth. We're seeing RevPAR growth for the state by about 3%, and then total room revenue for the state of Oklahoma is $853 million, and that's up 6.1% from this time last year. Here I have broken out performance between the 3 markets as STR defines them. So you have the Oklahoma area, which is going to be the more rural areas, Oklahoma City, and then Tulsa. So you can see that we're seeing strong RevPAR growth in Tulsa. Tulsa RevPAR growth is 7.2%, so that's the strongest of the other 2 markets that I'm showing here. Oklahoma City RevPAR growth is 1.6%, and then the Oklahoma area, surrounding area, is 2.3%. Oklahoma City, however, is doing a great job of driving rate growth right now. Rate growth is up 6.1% year over year. If you look at Tulsa, ADR growth is 3.7%. And then Oklahoma City, they're also seeing some occupancy declines right now, and a lot of that is going to be due to just the comps from last year because there were some tornadoes that came through, and so that really drove occupancy. And so now we're just recovering from that, so it's not really that fair of comps, but occupancy for Oklahoma City is down 4.3%, and Tulsa occupancy is up 3.3%. These are going to be what we call absolute figures. So if you look at, you can see occupancy in the light blue. This is going to be for all 3 markets. Occupancy for the Oklahoma area is 59.7%. Oklahoma City occupancy, almost 65%. And then Tulsa occupancy is 77.9%. The highest rates are going to be in Oklahoma City. ADR in Oklahoma City is $83.58. And then if you look at Tulsa, rates in Tulsa are only $78.14. So it's interesting to see that your occupancy in Tulsa is actually higher than what we're seeing in Oklahoma City, but rates are actually lower. So this is September 2014 year-to-date data. If we look at pipeline information for the state of Oklahoma as a whole, there are currently 23 projects in construction right now. If all of these, when all of these properties open, that will be bringing in about 1,700 new rooms. Final planning stages, which means that these properties will be opening or beginning construction within the next 12 months or so. We're showing 30 projects in final planning, bringing in an additional 3,200 new rooms to the state. And then those in active pipeline, which is anything that is in the planning, final planning, or in construction phases, there are 89 projects in the active planning phases. And then, of course, existing stock, I mentioned earlier, 838 rooms. Question?
That excludes casino hotel rooms, correct?
Actually, we are going to have casino hotels in our pipeline data, but we do not track performance data for them. But in our pipeline, this will include casino properties.
Do you have a breakout on these projects by the categories of Oklahoma City also?
We do, and when I get further into it, I'll talk about what we're seeing for Oklahoma City and then for Tulsa. And then if you want additional information, we have pipeline reports that can list each property and expected open dates and more details for you as well. Yes. So in Tulsa, Oklahoma, this is the map as STR defines it. So STR breaks down the entire market of Tulsa into two sub-market tracks. So we have the Tulsa Downtown and Airport track, and then Tulsa South Broken Arrow track. So moving forward, at first I'm going to kind of talk about the market as a whole, and then we'll compare performance between both of these tracks for you as well. So within the entire market of Tulsa, there are currently 152 hotels. That is 14,577 rooms. Currently, STR is collecting data from 82% of these properties. Occupancy is 59.8%. That's up 3.3% from this time last year. Average daily rate is $77.92. That's up 3.7% year over year. Revenue per available room for Tulsa is $46.58, and that's up 7.2%. So in Tulsa, we're actually seeing both occupancy and average daily rate driving revenue per available room.
So, I'm sorry, Lauren, the occupancy here shows 59.8. The slide earlier, two slides earlier, showed
77. Was that? It may not have been year-to-date data.
Next, forward one. Yeah, this one here. 77.9. September 2014 year to date.
That was probably a typo on my part. So the comments that I made earlier about Tulsa having higher occupancies than Oklahoma City were probably false. So good catch on that one. Let me double check on this and make sure that I wasn't.
My heart was pounding.
I do apologize for that. That is a typo. So occupancy for Tulsa is actually 59.8%. Like I said, I will double check and make sure that when we look at running 12 months and year to dates, that it's still around the 59-60% marker. But we're showing growth in occupancy by about 3.3%, which I think is more accurate than what the other chart showed. So I apologize for that. Average daily rate, like I said, in Tulsa is $77. Total room revenue for Tulsa market is $183 million, and that's up 7.4% from this time last year. If we zoom out and look at an annualized basis from about 2007 to year-to-date 2014, you can see that, like we saw in the U.S., Tulsa did see a decline in occupancy in early 2010, late 2009. Occupancy declined by about 10%, but we did see that occupancy rebound significantly, and occupancy now for Tulsa is 4.3% occupancy growth, and then 2.7 occupancy growth for Tulsa, and then we're seeing rate growth of 4.3%. So ADR is outpacing occupancy within the Tulsa market. I like to show this chart because it's going to break out the different days of the week. And if we look at, let's look at Tuesday and Wednesday. You can see occupancy in blue. Occupancy on a Tuesday, Wednesday night in Tulsa is going to be about almost 68%. And then if you look at Friday and Saturday, occupancy is 68% within the Tulsa market. If you look at Sunday, which is a normal lower occupancy night in hotels, occupancy is only 45.5%. And rates are lower on the Sunday night as well. Rates on Sundays are $75.09. So this chart really leads you to believe that Tulsa is capturing both business and leisure travelers. it makes you wonder if on a Sunday night, is there an opportunity for rate growth? Because if you think about it, most people that are staying in your property on a Sunday night, they're here for business, and so they really don't have a choice, so they're probably going to pay what you're asking. So that's something to think about as a hotelier, is there an opportunity for rate growth on Sundays? Here I've broken out the different chain scales within the Tulsa market. You can see that the upper tier really is experiencing demand growth. Looking at that upscale segment, demand growth is up 12.5% year over year. The upper upscale luxury segment, I combined these just because of samples. We didn't have significant data for the luxury properties within Tulsa, so I combined those two. The demand growth is up almost 5% in that chain scale category. Upper mid-scale, we're also seeing demand growth as well by almost 5%. We're seeing most of the supply growth, that's going to be in the upscale category, supply growth by about 3.1%. And then still talking about Tulsa as a whole, we're seeing positive occupancy and ADR growth in that upper tier. If you look at the the upscale segment, we're seeing occupancy growth by about 9%. And then the luxury upper upscale category, we're seeing occupancy increases by 4%, a little over 4%. So now if we break the market up and we look at the two different sub-market tracks as STR defines them, you can see that in the Tulsa downtown airport track, we're seeing RevPAR growth of 8.6%. Occupancy within the Tulsa downtown area is up 5.7% year over year, and then rate growth is only up by about 2.7%. If you look at the Tulsa South area, we're seeing moderate occupancy increases, but they're actually driving rate growth in the Tulsa South Broken Arrow area, more so than the downtown area. Rate growth is up 4.4%, and that's driving RevPAR growth of 6.1% in Tulsa South Broken Arrow. And then here, this is going to be the absolute numbers. So remember, we were looking at percent changes year over year. Now we're looking at what the numbers actually show. So occupancy is actually higher in the downtown airport area. Occupancy is 60% compared to Tulsa South. Not a big difference. Occupancy is 59% over there. There's about a $5 difference in rates. If you look at the downtown area, you're going to be paying about $80 per night as a consumer, compared to $75.77 per night in the Tulsa South Broken Arrow area. Revenue per available room, downtown is $49.09, and then in the South Broken Arrow area, RevPAR is $44.85. Here I have some competitive markets to you and to Oklahoma City. This is going to be occupancy year-to-date numbers through September. So you can see that Oklahoma City is really in the middle of the pack where occupancy is concerned. Occupancy is 65%. Austin, Texas on this chart is leading occupancy. Their occupancy is 74%, followed by Memphis, and then the US average, which was 66%. Tulsa right now, occupancy is going to be around 60%, and Little Rock 58%. So Tulsa is towards the bottom of this group of cities. But you are ahead of Albuquerque and Little Rock, Arkansas, where occupancy is concerned. But if we look, let's look at rates for a minute. If we look at rates, you can see that Tulsa, again, is towards the bottom, $77.92. If you look, comparing yourselves to Albuquerque, New Mexico, their rates right now are around $74. You're just behind Little Rock on rates. Rates are $78.35 in Little Rock. Oklahoma City, I showed you that earlier, that comparison. ADR in Oklahoma City is around $83. Memphis, $84. Kansas City, about $90. And then, of course, the US average ADR is $115. And then Austin, they were leading the pack in occupancy, and they're doing the same where ADR is concerned. An average room night in Austin is going to be about $125. So if we look at group versus transient travelers within Tulsa, you can see that group demand, this is going to be transient demand in blue and then transient ADR percent changes in green. You can see that transient ADRs really have remained in sync with demand. And we're seeing increases within both ADR and demand. We're seeing moderate increases, but really it's remained pretty choppy. Along with group performance, which is also very choppy, you can see that there were significant declines in group. Late 2008, early 2009, we saw ADR really drop on the group side, and then we have regained that. And if you look, you see that year to date, we're in a downward trajectory, but it's actually still positive growth because you're above that solid line. So we are still seeing growth both in group demand and group ADR percent change. So this is going to be transient and group from 2008 to year-to-date 2014. You can see that transient rates are going to be $85 compared to the group rate right now, which is about $78. Comparing that to, let's look at 2009. In 2009, average transient room night was about $77 and a group night was $71. So we have seen an increase in rates within both the transient and the group categories. So as you all know, there is a building boom going on right now in Tulsa. There are currently 27 projects in the pipeline in the Tulsa market. 6 of those are in construction right now, according to our record. 11 are in final planning, 10 are in the planning phases. Those in construction will be bringing in an additional 424 rooms. In final planning, we see about 1,400 new rooms coming in, and then 1,093 new rooms that are in the planning phases that will be opening. Planning is still going to be about 3 to 4 years off, as you all know. So this is a sneak peek into the pipeline. I'm sure that most of you are all aware of these projects. This is just to highlight a few. There's going to be the Holiday Inn Express and Suites. That's going to be in Claremore. That will have 80 new rooms, expected to open in August 2015. Also, the Hampton Inn and Suites in Claremore, bringing in an additional 80 rooms, also opening in August 2015. We also have the La Quinta, the Holiday Inn Express, the Best Western Plus, and then another Best Western Plus that's going to be off of Route 66. And so you can see projected open dates on all of those properties as well. And then if you have any questions regarding these hotels and addresses, chain scales, open dates, we have that available. We can provide to you in our pipeline report, so be sure to ask me. So that is pipeline for Tulsa. I'm going to get into projections later on, but right now I'm going to shift gears a little bit and talk about Oklahoma City and what we're seeing going on over there. As you all know, in May of last year, May 20th, tornadoes came through and really devastated the city, and it impacted performance on hotels significantly. So these numbers that I have here are going to be 2 days after the tornadoes came through in Norman and Moore. So occupancy 2 days after, on May 22nd, 2013, occupancy was 84.8%. That was an increase of about 28% year over year. The good thing is that average daily rate was only $83.33, so there really wasn't any price gouging going on at that time. Rates only increased by about 3.8% during the tornadoes. Revenue per available room was $70.70 post-tornadoes, and that was an increase of 33.7%. So we really saw strong RevPAR increases due to those tornadoes. But where are we today? What numbers are we seeing? Of course, there's currently 247 hotels in Oklahoma City. That's about 23,000 rooms. We collect data from almost 80% of those properties. Occupancy is just under 65%. And of course, we're seeing occupancy declines by about 4.3%. As I mentioned earlier, that's just because of those comps. We saw those large increases in occupancy, and so it's really not fair to look at that growth or lack thereof of growth. Average daily rate for Oklahoma City is going to be just under $84. That's up 6.1% year over year. Revenue per available room, we're seeing moderate increases, 1.6%. That is being driven by rate growth. Total room revenue for Oklahoma City is $344 million, and that's up 4.5% year over year.
Lauren?
Yes.
Quick question. In Oklahoma City market, that includes Norman, Edmond, all the outlying.
It does, yes. Yes, so we break that up into submarket tracks. They do have their own submarket as a whole, but these numbers are going to be the full Oklahoma City market that I'm referring to. So yes, great question. These numbers that we're showing here, it's the entire Oklahoma City that does include Norman and Moore and surrounding areas. So really this is a similar pattern to what we just saw in Tulsa. We saw decreases in occupancy 2009, 2010, finally beginning to see that rebound. When we look at it on an annualized basis, we're seeing declines in occupancy by about 4.2%, but we're seeing strong rate growth of almost 6% in Oklahoma City. Oklahoma City is also capturing both business and leisure travelers. If you look at Tuesday, Wednesday night, their average occupancy is also about 67.9, about 68%. Average daily rate on Tuesday, Wednesday night is going to be around $85. If you look at a Friday, Saturday night, average occupancy is around 69%, and then average night is going to be about $81, $82 where rate is concerned.
I have a question. In the slide before, their occupancy was going down, but their ADR was going up. Do you have any thoughts about that?
What was the question? What occupancy was going down?
It was going down, but their ADR was going up. Do you have any comments?
They were just able to drive rate growth, and that's because of the tornadoes that came through. That's why we saw those decreases in occupancy. So while their occupancy, where you look at growth, is down, it's because of those comps that we're looking at. So they're still.
It started before the tornadoes. If you look at the graph, it starts back in 13 and late 12. It's actually going up.
They are just bold hoteliers, and they're driving rates. I don't really have an answer to that. I'm sorry.
That's probably right. More bold.
Could be.
Oh,
It's our new motto, be bold.
all right. I'm just going to say one word. 2 words. Be bold.
Don't quote that. So if we look at some of the markets within Oklahoma City, as I told you, that does include Norman Moore, Oklahoma City Southeast, Oklahoma City North and West, and the Oklahoma City Airport. These are the sub-market tracks making up the entire market as a whole. So we're seeing rate growth, the strongest rate growth in the Southeast area, followed by the North and West Oklahoma City area, and then the downtown area, their rate growth is up almost 5%, and then Norman rates are up 4%. If we look at absolute figures, you can see that rates right now are the highest in the northwest area of Oklahoma City. Rates are just under $93. If you look at the airport area, an average room night is going to be about $76.97. If you look at Southeast, average daily rate is $70, and then Norman and Moore, average daily rate is $80.
Is Bricktown Northwest, you know?
I think it is actually included in what we call the downtown. Actually, I don't know. Let me double check on that. Did someone say yes? Yes. Yes, it is. So the Oklahoma area, which I said is going to encompass more of the rural areas, this is going to be Oklahoma West and then Oklahoma East area. Oklahoma East is going to include Ardmore, Chandler, McAllister, Wilburton. Oklahoma West area, you can see, is going to include Fort Sill, Cordell, Laverne, Beaver. All of those cities are included in Oklahoma West. So within the more rural areas, there are currently 439 hotels within that market. We currently collect data from about 56%, so not as strong of a sample over there, and that is due to a lot of those properties being independent. Occupancy within this area is just under 60%. That's down by about 2% year over year. Average daily rate over there is going to be $76.86. That's up 4.5% year over year. Revenue per available room, increase of about 2%, a little over 2%, and then total room revenue for the Oklahoma area, $325 million, and that's up 7.2% year over year. So if we look at weekday versus weekend, you can see that weekday occupancy is actually surpassing 2007 peaks that you see there on the left. Or actually, it's really just where it is, 60% occupancy on the weekday for Oklahoma area compared to 55% on the weekday in 2007. If you look at weekend occupancy really is still the same, 60% on the weekend compared to where we were in 2007 as well. Also, there's very little difference in weekday versus weekend rates within these areas. There's only a $2 difference in room nights comparing weekday versus weekend. But if you look at where rates were in 2007, average daily rate was only $63 in those areas, and now they've increased to about $76, $77 a night.
Are these some of these oil markets, do you know?
Yes, a majority of these areas are going to be oil markets. Great question. And then within the Oklahoma area pipeline, I know this is hard for you to see. We show in construction, there's 6 properties. This is just a snapshot of our actual pipeline report. If you were to order a market pipeline report, that is going to be 406 rooms right now that are in construction. We're showing 9 in final planning. That's 626 rooms in final planning, and then an additional 14 projects that are in the planning phases. So now we've talked about some of the pipeline that we're seeing within Oklahoma. Let's look at the total U.S. Total U.S. in construction, there's an increase of about 34% rooms. Right now, there's 110,000 rooms under construction within the U.S. compared to last year. There were 82,000 new rooms. So we are beginning to slowly see an increase in supply within the U.S. Not a significant growth of supply as we're seeing within Tulsa. Of course, Tulsa is a smaller market. So Tulsa really, if all of these projects open, it'll be about a 20% increase in new supply. Within the U.S., we're seeing most of these properties are going to be limited service properties in that upscale, upper mid-scale category. That's because these are usually the quickest to build and the easiest to finance. Here I've highlighted some of the top markets with over 2% expected increases in supply. Of course, New York City's on there with expected increases of 12%. Phoenix, Minneapolis, Chicago, Seattle, also markets that are expecting significant supply increases. These are the top 5 markets with the highest supply growth. New York, I mentioned Nashville has a lot of new supply coming in by about 3%. Denver, Colorado, San Diego, California, and Philadelphia, all experiencing significant supply growth. So if we look into our crystal ball for 2014, 2015, let's start with Tulsa and what we're expecting to see. This is for the remainder of 2014. So for November and for December, we're expecting to see occupancy increases by about 2.7%. But we're still expecting to see significant rate increases of 4.4%, which will drive RevPAR growth of 7%. So we do expect to see rates continue to increase within the Tulsa market. Moving forward in 2015, you'll notice that we really aren't expecting too significant of occupancy increases. Occupancy is kind of going to remain steady, but average daily rate is really where we expect to see the growth. We expect to see ADR growth by about 5.2% in 2015, which will drive RevPAR growth of about 4.5%, or 4.6% for 2015. So this is our projections right now, and this is including the additional 800 rooms that we're expecting to open in 2015. So you'll notice that we really aren't expecting that to affect your RevPAR too much moving forward. We expect rosy forecasts for 2015. If we look at absolute numbers, we expect to end the year with occupancy around 58%. Average daily rates, we expect to see around $78.66, which will equal a revenue per available room of about $46. In 2015, like I said, not too much occupancy growth at all. Still expect to be around 58%, but we expect for room nights to be about $82.75 in 2015. Revenue per available room, if these numbers are correct, should be around $48.32 for 2015. So the key to driving RevPAR is really going to be on the rate side. That's where we expect to see the growth. So now you've seen Tulsa projections. Let's compare that to the total U.S. Not a lot of new supply on where U.S. is concerned. We're expecting to see strong rate growth, though. If you look at rate increases for the U.S., increases of about 4.2% for the remainder of the year and 4.4% for next year for 2015. So similar story. We're expecting to see rate growth drive RevPAR growth. RevPAR growth should end the year by about 7% and then 5.2% RevPAR growth expected for 2015 in the U.S. This is just kind of broken out within the chain scales. You can see that the luxury chain scale is really going to be driving rate growth. We're expecting to see rate growth within that segment increase by about 4.6%. Upper upscale also increases in rates of about 4.4% for 2014. Similar story if we look at 2015 now. Moderate occupancy growth, if at all, within each of these chain scale segments. But if you look at rate growth, we're expecting rate growth of anywhere from 3.5% to almost 5% among each of these segments, which will be driving RevPAR growth across the board. So moving forward, looking at 2014 year-end RevPAR, this is our top 25 markets. So anything that we expect to see growth of 0 to 5%, that's going to be Chicago, New Orleans, New York, Philadelphia, and Washington. 5 to 10% bucket, where growth is concerned, we have Miami, Los Angeles, Detroit, Anaheim, San Diego, and St. Louis. And then we're expecting significant RevPAR growth of 10 to 15% in Atlanta, Boston, Dallas, Denver, San Fran, Seattle, and Tampa. And then, of course, Nashville, which is hot right now, increases of 15% where RevPAR is concerned. And then this is 2015. It's going to be a similar story. Nashville still at the top, Anaheim, Boston, Chicago, San Diego. You see the list. We're expecting 5 to 10% RevPAR growth for 2015. For these markets. So with that, I'm going to end this with some takeaways. We all know supply growth is accelerating rapidly within Oklahoma, within Tulsa specifically, much faster than probably some of you in the room would like to see. But we do expect to continue to see positive numbers moving forward where RevPAR and rate are concerned. Group demand and ADR still remain choppy. We talked about that a little bit earlier. Some of that is just because the way that the group numbers are being reported to us. But we are beginning to see the return of the group travelers, so that is good as well. And then we do expect to see positive RevPAR growth for both Oklahoma City and Tulsa in the remainder of 2014 and in 2015. And this will be driven by healthy rate growth. And then also, I just wanted to kind of share this for additional resources. There is all sorts of talk right now about Airbnb. I know that is a hot topic, how Airbnb is going to affect occupancy and demand throughout hotels. And this is a study that was done by our digital news site, hotelnewsnow.com. So I encourage you to go review this article. It's actually 25 pages, but it's going to talk about some of our thoughts and some of the industry experts on Airbnb and how that may impact our industry. So with that, I'm going to open it up for any additional questions. Does anyone have questions for me? Yes.
I'm surprised we're not seeing more increase in occupancy when you're talking about strong group demand, and then it looks like actually you're predicting the occupancy to be flat nationwide as well as Tulsa. We're not even expecting these new projects to open next year, and we're still looking at flat occupancy. Why would that be?
There are going to be about 800 new rooms that will be opening in 2015. So when we took those properties into, or those new rooms into account, that was the reason for the flat occupancy.
The outlying areas?
For the Tulsa market as a whole, yes. These numbers were for Tulsa. But if you all wanted to see projections for even your specific properties, we have a custom datacast report that our STR analytics team, they're based in Boulder, and so they could run those reports for you and provide you with projections for your property and then for your comp set as well. So that's always a resource. It's available as a one-time run or an annual subscription. Anyone else? Yeah, Pete.
Lauren, on the Oklahoma City slide, it was really surprising that in 2013 they had tornadoes, which increased their demand dramatically, and yet the supply, the demand went back down, but ADR stayed very strong. I mean, either we're leaving money on the table in Tulsa, or we need tornadoes, one or the other.
That's a very interesting observation, but
I mean, it's just it's very surprising that we as a market can't maintain the ADR growth that they're having still. So I think that's something for us to really take away from this presentation.
Yes, Neela.
Hey, Lauren. So just a question for me would be, let's compare the two communities and take a look at chain scale. And how does chain scale truly vary? What's the variance for Oklahoma City as a market versus Tulsa as a market? And how much does that truly influence the gain or losses in ADR?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's going to depend. Yeah, we certainly could. We could just compare, you want to say the luxury segments in Oklahoma City, or the upper end segments within Oklahoma City, to the upper end tier properties within Tulsa.
Percentage of your supply,
Mm-hmm.
take a percentage of supply, right? You've got 59% reporting in one area, I think 60 plus in the other area.
Mm-hmm.
Take a quick sample. What do those chain scales look like? I don't think it's just luxury. And then we can really pinpoint where do we truly have the opportunity, backing up Pete's point.
Yeah.
You know, and
That would be an
way,
interesting
as
study.
hoteliers, we can sit down and really analyze what are we doing about it, and what does that look like from our own business model and profitability. You know, then the onus is back on us.
Mm-hmm. That's definitely something we can do. If we want to talk offline about that,
So
we do that.
can you provide some sort of snapshot, and then we can start kind of going from there? Is that possible?
Sure. I mean, it would be a custom report run by our Boulder office to do something like that, but we can definitely talk offline about that, what that would entail.
That might be helpful. You know?
One other point. You know, we have Visit Tulsa in the room. Ray and his team are in here. I mean, we'd like to know that are we seeing things that they're contributing to make sure our demand increases in this market? I mean, we put a lot of time and effort into making sure that we have a strong CVB. And Ray, maybe you can touch on some of the things that we're looking for in 2015, 2016.
That's
Put me on the spot.
Yeah, you do make a great point. Are there some big groups that you have on the books for 2015 that we may not know about?
Thank you. That's what I get for a free lunch, right? A couple of things. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
I can tell you that we're in the process of closing, and Pete, you're part of this group. Very rare in our business does the CVB and the Sports Commission go out and raise $6.4 million out of the private sector and the hotel sector just to use for event and sports closing fund. It's rare that we do that. It's $1.6 million a year for the next 4 years. I can tell you I have a board meeting tomorrow night, and we've already got events lined up that we're going to pay to play with, and my staff's in here too, and we're breaking them down literally so that we look at the group, their attendee number, the number of days, the time of the year, and then what's the return on our investment. If we give them $500,000 to show up in town, what's the economic impact, what's the room numbers, and what's the percentages. So just to let you know how detailed we are about picking our groups, because if they don't make some of those metrics, we're not interested in them. So we've really changed our business model. We just don't bring people to town anymore. We look at they're really going to deliver the room number and the economic impact of the community. So that 1.6 is going to work for all of you. Because I can tell you we should know this week about Bassmaster Classic. We have the Youth National Soccer Championships next spring. We have the Big 12 Baseball. None of those have been in the market. Big 12 Baseball and Youth National Soccer has never been in the market. Bass would be a return from 13. But we also have the President's Cup in 15 or 16, the USA Wrestling Dual National Championships. It's the largest dual wrestling championship in the country. It's coming here for the first time ever. It'll be here in 16. So I can share that report with you. I just have to be careful because if our competitors saw that, they'd know what we're chasing and they'd know what we're spending to acquire them. Because it's really about how much money can you give them to get them here. The NCAA, we have 4 bids out for the NCAA men's and women's basketball in 16, 17, and 18. So we have a lot in the pipeline. We're working on a new equestrian show that we're going to own and operate. We developed a new XPO video gaming conference next October. We own and operate that, guys. we own that. So it's not leaving, it's not going to Oklahoma City like the DUG conference. So we're creating probably 3 more events that we're going to own and operate, which is kind of different in the CBD sports world, but we're going to own them. And then we're also working with a new energy conference that will be here every year that we own and operate. So we're really starting to generate some of our own business concepts so that we don't have to pay for them to come back. Knowing that we've got this event money through 18, I think you're going to see big traction for us with the NCAA and USA Wrestling and some of those other folks. Our equine partners are trying to help us develop more shows. So we can share that with you at the next Team Tulsa meeting or one of the other things, but we really are trying to drive the calendar, and I know a lot of that doesn't show up on Smith's travel report, but that's stuff that we have in our bucket. We just haven't, some of them aren't announced and some of them are just coming to fruition. So I can tell you that we've already accounted for the 1.6 for the next 3 years we've spent on events we're chasing. So, and all of them are new. None of it's repeat business with the exception of 1 or 2. So it's very important for the market, for you to know that it's all new stuff. Just the bucket keeps getting bigger is our challenge. So we may be raising it 3 or 4%, but you're spreading, making the bucket bigger so we have more rooms to sell in the market. So that's a little bit of our traction problem is the growth.
Thank you. Anything else? Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you all for your time. You've been very attentive. Thank you for having me.
I want to thank everybody for coming out today and your support throughout the year. Big shout out to Visit Tulsa and the Sports Commission for your energy and effort every day. Thank you, Lauren Faulkner, for coming in today. We really appreciate great information. As a famous man once said, be bold in 2015. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day. No big rush to get out of here, so please spend time mixing and mingling. Thanks, everybody.